So it's kind of funny because obviously part of my job at work is answering phone calls, and I also do this podcast, which is both to do with talking. And it's funny that I find I don't tend to breathe correctly, if that makes sense. I hold my breath a lot and try not to exhale too sharply, which then means I end up being out of breath half the time, which is not good. And it's mostly just because I know that the microphone is picking up everything, whereas in a normal conversation, you're not hearing all of the breaths that people take, but over a phone call, when the microphone is literally like centimeters from your face, they're gonna hear everything. Anyway, hello and welcome back to The Lion's Den. I'm your host, Matt, as always, and today I've got a couple of things to talk about, carrying on from last week just a little bit, as well as looking to the future. I think there's a song in there somewhere, but anyway, let's jump in. I think I start saying that now with every episode with let's jump in. Oh well. So first thing, quiet time. I think I've taken the Myers-Briggs test. It's complete hokum, supposedly, because apparently people can answer the same test minutes apart and get different results because you answer questions slightly differently. But it's supposed to be a personality test that determines multiple things about you, mainly one of them being whether you're an introvert or extrovert type of person, which is kind of stupid because, yeah, there are gonna be people that are hard one way or the other, but most people are probably somewhere in that spectrum, and everyone has slight variations on how they function in social circumstances. For me personally, I understand that I do get a lot out of being around other people, especially people I know and I enjoy being with and doing stuff that I'm happy to do. In those scenarios, I get a big boost and I will want more and more and more of it until a certain point where I'm like, okay, I'm fulfilled. The rest of the time, I just want to be vibing by myself and just chilling. And I really enjoy quiet alone time. So, for example, when people are at home, I really like that. It's nice knowing that there are other people in the vicinity and that you're not on your own. It makes you feel a bit safer. But I do also appreciate when they are not intrusive or not physically present in any way. So, my best example was at university. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I could walk through the house. I could spend the entire day without ever running into another person. But there were other people, which was always reassuring. And I especially like it at home when everyone's out of the house doing whatever they're doing, because it means that, yes, the house is empty and it's just me and Holly, our cat. But it means that I get the reassuring feeling that they will be coming back at some point. But I also get that quietness and non-interaction that I think is really handy at certain times. I think my situation is helped a lot by the internet, because obviously I can always just reach out to someone if I wanted to chat. Yeah, it's not quite the same as being in there physically with them, but having somebody at the push of a button away just to say hi and to chat with is always nice. Which I think is why I'm very possessive of my phone and always very scared when something goes wrong with it, because it's my connection to the world, right? But yeah, I understand that a lot of people have varying levels of what I've just described. Some people are the complete opposite. They absolutely love going out with people, and any sort of social alone time is very draining to them. Some people get the opposite. They find big social situations really draining and very hard, and therefore prefer quiet time by themselves, which is why I think the Myers-Briggs test, as noted psychologists have said, is kind of stupid, because it puts you in a box when nobody is in a box. Everyone is kind of wavy and all over the place and can change from one week to the next. So yeah, there's that. Okay, a little bit of psychoanalysis for you. The next thing is switch spines, which I talked about last week. Now, if you've gone and Googled what that is, you already have half an idea. But for context, Nintendo games have generally had some sort of interesting spine to them. In the DS days, they tended to be the logo in the style of the game. The 3DS days, they used to put the font and then a little icon. I think the icon tended to be the one that was then on the system when you launched a game. I think for the Wii U and the Wii and other console games, they tended again to put like the name of the game in a specific font, which always looked really nice, right? It was nice having that kind of variety and the visual interesting designs. That was always good. With the Switch, they standardized it, and they standardized it in not a great way. So the way it works on Switch is you have the Nintendo Switch logo at the top, the name of the game in a very basic font, and then the logo of the developer, whether it be Nintendo, Activision, Ubisoft, whatever, right? And then it's just white text on a red background, because obviously that's the Switch logo. It's fine. It looks at least visually consistent, and you get just this nice red block for your games if you line them all up and have them on display, as I do. But it's kind of boring. When I stumbled upon Switch Spines, I was immediately enthralled, because this is a community-driven thing where people have designed custom spines for your Switch cases that you can either have made for you, or you can print them out yourself, and then all you have to do is just slide this little bit of paper in between the sort of plastic sheet and the actual game cover of the case, because you can just gently bend the case backwards and separate the layers. Nothing is permanent, nothing is stuck anywhere. You're just putting a piece of paper in to cover up what's existing and putting in something new. And I love it. I absolutely think it's fantastic, because it just brings a level of customization and interest to what was previously just a bland set of red cases. Now, I had some troubles with it, because it's a simple enough process if you want to do what I did, which is grab pre-made ones that other people have done and then print them out and make them yourself. I just ran into some troubles because I'm an idiot, but that's fine. So first off, I have a lot of very common games, which is good for me, obviously, because it means there will be a lot of options. And this was all on a Reddit post, by the way. If you Google Switch Spines and then Reddit, you'll be able to find it really easily. And then within that subreddit, you can search the names of games like I did and find everything and anything you want. All of the big stuff, you know, your Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart, Super Mario Odyssey, Animal Crossing, Super Smash Bros., all of those stuff, there will be multiple different options. For some of the more niche things, I say niche, which is hilarious, you know, like your Crash Bandicoot and your Spyro Reignited trilogy, there will be less options. And then if there isn't one for a game maybe you've got a really niche third-party game, you might have to end up making them, but there is a detailed guide about how to make them yourself with all of the requisite templates and stuff, which is really awesome. But I went through and grabbed all of my games, and I actually stumbled across a consistent line by a single guy on Reddit. So I was like, oh, okay, have they got a version for all of my games? And they had a version for literally every game I have except one. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get both, the ones that I think look really cool and then this guy's set, and print them all out and see which ones I liked. I ended up going with the guy's set just because I like the visual consistency, and the way he's done it is really cool. Some of the logos I don't quite agree with. I would have done them slightly differently myself, but you know, for the fact that it's free is phenomenal. So all you would then have to do is download all of the files, and the ones that people have pre-made on there are all the correct size. You just import them into this template setup that they've got, and then you can print them out. People have also posted guidance about doing it through Microsoft Word. So for context, the guide actually gives you a Photoshop file, which most art programs can open Photoshop files, but then I don't know how printing works with those. So I was like, okay, let me see if I can do this in Word, right? And people have told you how to do it in Word. It's really simple. You just import all of the images. They gave you exact measurements for the size of the image, and you can just type those into Word and produce a sheet with a bunch of these images on. You cut them all out, shove them in your cases. Fab. I had a few problems, mainly my own problems, but maybe some tips and tricks for other people might be useful. So the first problem that I made was putting all of the images too close together. I tried to condense as many images onto a single sheet of paper, just because that saves on paper, right? But that was a stupid idea because I needed 2 pages anyway. Not all of them would have fit on 1 page, so I should have just spaced them out more. That's my first problem, is space out the each individual spine more on the page. The reason is because when you come to cut them out, if you have a literal like 3mm gap between two of them, that's really hard to cut out and get a clean line, as well as not just cutting into the actual spine itself. The second thing is make sure your printer settings are correct. This was devastating, right? So for context, the Switch spine is something like 16 centimeters by 1 centimeter. That's how big the spine is and how big you set the images. That's not completely accurate, but just for sake of argument, that's what it is. By default, the printer I used, if you print via PDF, shrinks to fit the image to the page. So what that did is, instead of printing at 100% scale, it printed at 95% scale. Now the problem is 95% of 1 centimeter is 9.5 millimeters. Quick maths for you. You can't tell the difference between 9.5 millimeters and 1 centimeter, I'll tell you for a fact. But you can tell the difference between 16 centimeters and 15-ish centimeters. That's very obvious. So I was freaking out because when I first printed them out, they looked fine. I thought, oh, this is fantastic. I'm really excited. I came home. I started to cut them out, and that's where everything went wrong. First off, I was trying multiple different cutting methods to get the cleanest cut, but I kept ripping them. And literally, I went full force ahead, and the first cutting method I did completely tore up the first Smash Bros. One. So that was getting me in a mess. And then the whole gap issue was making it even more hard. And I was like, oh, fine, whatever. I'm going to have to print these out anyway. But I kept going. I cut all of them out and thought, okay, cool. I can go now check for proof of concept and see what they're like. And then that's when I went and put one of them in the case and went, what? Why is it the wrong size? No, why is it's not tall enough? And I was super confused. And my brain initially did think, oh, has the printer scaled it? But my brain couldn't figure out why the width was correct, but the height wasn't. Well, now I know why, because the width wasn't correct, but it was so negligible you couldn't tell. But you could tell that the height was very incorrect. So I got really upset about that. And then figured out, yes, I have created the document correctly, everything is the correct size, I modified the distance, and then I checked the printer settings. Well, firstly, I actually printed it through Word instead of as a PDF, because Word by default doesn't do any scaling shenanigans, so that works fine. And then when I was looking through the printer settings on the PDF, I went, oh, PDFs print at 95% for whatever reason. I don't know why that's the default, but it is. So got that sorted, printed it out, brought it home, used the correct method for cutting, which in my case was a massive, huge sliding guillotine. You know, one of those that has a rail and then like a block with the whatever to slice it on, and you slide it back and forth. That was the best method for me out of the things I had. Got all of them cut out, and then once I'd actually got them all completed and put together, I was very happy. I was like, this looks phenomenal. It looks really cool and really visually interesting. The funny one is Super Mario Odyssey, because obviously that's a very red game, so they made the spine basically the same Switch red, so that's the only one that looks like an original case but has the font of the logo. Ironic, but still cool either way. And if I ever end up buying more games, I can just print out more Switch spines, which is super awesome. I keep looking back at them and it's just like, ooh, really cool. So I'd recommend that if you have Switch games and you want to make them vastly more interesting. It's a little bit of work, and if you are worried about printer ink, maybe don't do this, because obviously they're very colourful and it's a lot of ink. I would definitely suggest when you print them out, I had on one page a large chunk of nothing being printed, and I used that section to practice cutting. That's what I should have done the first time round when I had all the scaling wrong. I had multiple different methods that I could use to cut them out. I had the sliding guillotine, I had one of those lever guillotines where you bring an arm down, and I had this other style guillotine that had a little, like, I don't know how to describe it, but that was the worst one because it was not as hefty as the sliding guillotine, so it just wouldn't cut through the paper consistently, and I ended up dragging and tearing it instead. Oh, and I had Stanley knives, but Stanley knives, whilst give you the most flexibility and freedom to cut out and could probably get you the most accurate cuts, that's entirely dependent to you. And my problem with that was I was not consistent enough with a Stanley knife. I kept either pushing the knife, I kept ending up not using the knife hard enough, and therefore I'd have to go back over, which increases the risk of just cutting it wrong, or I would slip, or I would push the ruler I was using and end up cutting into the spine itself. So I wouldn't recommend that unless you're a whiz with Stanley knives. I would generally suggest using a big guillotine and just take your time, be very slow with it, make sure everything's lined up, and then just go with that. The sliding guillotine was the most consistent for me, so I would recommend that if you have it. Otherwise, I did look up, and people on specifically Etsy was where I saw it, do offer this service where they'll collect the Switch spines, or they'll make them for you and print them out and then ship them to you. That's fine if you don't want to go through the hassle of this. And obviously in that case, for example, they might be able to print it on like glossy printer paper, so then it's closer to the actual book, closer to the cover, because I just put mine on bog standard printer paper. But it was something like £8 for a set of 10, I think. And I was like, sure. but I'd rather just do it myself. It's that question of time versus money. And well, I suppose as well, whether you can actually do it. If you have an access to a printer and a guillotine and some time, go for it. Otherwise, consider your options. Otherwise, this has been another episode. There's buttons down below. If you wouldn't mind hitting them, that'd be fantastic. The like button, subscribe button, sharing it with people, to the whole world. This is episode 98. We're going to have some fun in a couple episodes with the 100. So I hope you all have a fantastic week, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.